إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا ونبينا مولانا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا مولانا محمد وأصحابه وبارك وسلم صلوا عليه صلاة وسلام عليك يا سيدي يا سندي يا حبيبي يا طبيبي يا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آلك وأصحابك يا رحمة للعالمين نحمده ونصلي ونسلم على رسوله الكريم أما بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وكونوا مع الصادقين صدق الله مولانا العظيم وبلغنا رسوله النبي الأمين المكين الكريم ونحن على ذلك لمن الشاهدين والشاكرين والحمد لله رب العالمين غوث أعظم ومن بيسر ساما مدد قبلائه مدد كعبائه إمام مدد قادری امنا عرائے غوث اعظم نزنم دمز شیخ احمد رضا قطب عالم نزنم سیدی یا مرشدی شاہ مصطفیٰ زندہ باد مسلک سرکار اعلیٰ حضرت زندہ باد یا الہی مسلک احمد رضا زندہ باد حفظ ناموس رسالت کا جو ذمہ دار ہے سیدی یا مرشدی شاہ مصطفیٰ زندہ باد حامل فیض رضا مصطفیٰ امداد کن صلی اللہ علیہ النبی امی وآلہ صلی اللہ علیہ وسلم صلاة وسلام عليك يا سيدي يا سندي يا حبيبي يا طبيبي يا رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وعلى آلك وأصحابك يا رحمة للعالمين. Our praise is due to Almighty Allah. Durood and salams upon the most perfect, exalted and glorified of Allah's creation, Sayyiduna wa Mawlana Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Peace, blessings and salutations upon the Anbiya Kiram, Ahl Bayt Athhar, Sahaba Kiram, Khulafa Rashidin, Tabi'in, Tabi' Tabi'in, Imam Mujtahidin, Awliya Kamilin, and all those who follow the path until the last day. We thank Almighty Allah for His infinite mercy and for the sadaqah of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam for blessing us with the opportunity to congregate in Salat al-JUMMAH and to prostrate in His most exalted court. Before continuing, let us direct our hearts and our thoughts towards the holy and the sanctified court of the beloved Rasul sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam, and doing so let us collectively recite the word Sharif. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina wa Nabiyana Mawlana Muhammadin wa ala ali Sayyidina Mawlana Muhammadin ma'adil al-judi wal-karam wa alihi al-kiram wa abni al-kareem wa barik wa sallu alayhi. Alhamdulillah, by the grace of Allah Almighty and the blessings of the beloved Rasul sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam, Almighty Allah has, by His grace, placed on this earth those servants of Almighty Allah or the means of connecting us towards the court of Almighty Allah. These pious and these blessed servants of Almighty Allah in every era, in every zamana, have sometimes been manifest, evident, recognizable, identifiable, and at times they have also been concealed from the sights of the people, so that the people may make an effort to seek them out. Allah Almighty has sent man to this earth, and by His divine wisdom He has placed them into different categories. The most elite and the most exalted amongst all the creation are the Anbiya Ikram alayhi salatu wassalam. And amongst them, the most superior is Imam al-Anbiya Sayyiduna Mawlana Muhammad sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wa sallam. And thereafter are the companions of the beloved Rasul sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and his noble household. And thereafter the Tabi'in and the Tabi' Tabi'in and the Imam Mujtahidin going forth. And till we reach the category of those who are the manifestations of these beloveds of Almighty Allah, who in simple terms are known as the awliya Allah, the beloveds and the near and the dear servants of Allah. These servants of Almighty Allah, these beloved servants of Almighty Allah, the awliya, Allah has put them on this earth so that they may manifest the blessings from the courts of those before them. And those blessings become the means of simple people like us and ordinary people, laymen, being conducted to the court of Almighty Allah, through them into the court of the beloved Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and into the court of the great Almighty Allah. That is why even the most pious of servants have always used the means and the wasila of the other pious servants who were before them. One example, say the HAZRAT Imam Ahl Sunnat Shah Imam Ahmad Raza Khan Fazl Barelvi radiallahu anhu says in one of his kalams that Teri Sarkar mein lata hai Raza usko shafi'. Teri Sarkar mein lata hai Raza usko shafi' jo mera hawth hai aur ladla beta tera. He's talking about Sayyidina Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani al-Baghdadi radiallahu anhu, and he's saying the gist of the couplet is that in your court Raza brings him as a mediator, as a means, who is my Khawf, he is my master, but he is the most beloved descendant of the court of the beloved Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, one of the most beloved descendants of the court of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So this has been the tariqah of the pious predecessors. These beloved servants of Almighty Allah, the awliya Allah, I mentioned to you a few weeks back, and I'm going to repeat this narration so that you may better understand what I'm going to discuss. Time is very short today, but I'm going to try and do this quickly. The great personality and the son of Sayyidina Imam Zainul Abidin radiallahu anhu, whom I've mentioned this narration many times. I'm repeating it because you will better understand what I'm going to say after that. HAZRAT Sayyidina, before I tell you this, let me tell you that those pious servants of Allah, the awliya Allah, amongst them also there are numerous categories. Okay, and time does not permit to go into detail. But there are those who are even found hidden amongst the ordinary people. They will be hidden amongst the laymen. And you and I won't recognize them because of their tattered clothes and their matted hair. These are those towards whom sometimes you will not even look, because in inverted commas they're not in our level. Okay, sad, it's very sad. Afsos ki baat hai. It's very sad. You look down upon somebody because of how he dresses. You want to look down at somebody because his financial status is not equal to yours, or he cannot wear the kind of topi or turban that you wear. No. Do not do this. Do not do this. Distinction is only on the basis of Iman. All of us have a special excellence because of our Iman. It's not because of what we wear. It's not because of where we live. It's not because of what we own. It is because of the strength of your Iman. The stronger is the person's Iman, the closer he is in the court of Allah. Not because he wears a more beautiful jummah, he is closer in the court of Almighty Allah. Okay? So, keep this in your mind, and you will understand the discussion better. I will try to complete it today, briefly. HAZRAT Sayyidina Imam Baqir radiallahu anhu, who is the son of Sayyidina Imam Zainul Abidin radiallahu anhu. Okay? HAZRAT Sayyidina Imam Baqir is also the father of Sayyidina Imam Jafar radiallahu ta'ala. Okay? So I mentioned this waqia before, and this statement of his, and I'm repeating, that he said to Hazrat Sayyidina Imam Baqir radiallahu anh, said to Imam Jafar as-Sadiq radiallahu anh, he said, my beloved son, Almighty Allah has hidden three things in three things. Allah has concealed three things in three things. He has concealed His pleasure in His obedience. Apne raza mandi ko apne itaat mein. He has concealed His pleasure in His obedience. So do not disobey any command of Allah. So do not disobey any command of Allah for you do not know in which one is Allah's pleasure. Okay? He hid his pleasure, his mercy in his ita'at, in his obedience. He said the second thing, he has concealed his wrath, his azab in his disobedience. He has concealed, hidden his wrath, his ghazab in his disobedience. So do not think of any sin as minor, for you do not know in which the wrath of Allah will descend. ये सोचे ये छोटी सी बात है, इसमें कुछ नहीं होगा, उसी में ग़ज़ब इलाही होगा. In that the azab of Allah will descend. You don't know. And the third thing he said, which is our discussion, the third thing he said, he has hidden the awliya, these beloved friends of Allah, the beloveds of Allah. And when we say friend, it's not like friend like you and I. We are talking about the beloveds of Almighty Allah. Okay, here friend means beloved. Those who are near, who Allah has given this closeness in His court, they have attained the maqam al-qurb. Regarding them, he says that Allah, as Sayyidina Imam Bakr radiallahu anh says, Allah has hidden the awliya Allah amongst the people. So do not look down. So do not look down on any true servant of Allah, for you do not know if he is a wali. Don't look down. Okay? Now on this very same discussion, on the 18th of this month, was the Urs Sarapa Quds of HAZRAT Sayyidina Mahbub Ilahi Nizamuddin Awliya radiallahu ta'ala, one of the great mashayikh of the silsila. Okay? What does he tell us about this and these people, these blessed personalities? And I'm mentioning him because it was his Urs, and also he has given some beautiful advice. He talks in his discussions, which were reported and which were recorded by HAZRAT Sayyidina Amir Khusru radiallahu anhu. He speaks in his discussions and in his assemblies words of great wisdom. And I'm going to share with you something that he said today. HAZRAT Mahbub Ilahi radiallahu anhu, Sayyidina Khaja Nizamuddin Awliya radiallahu anhu said that the elite, when we talk about elite here, we're not talking about this, the financial elite. We are talking about the spiritual elite. He said the elite ones are also found hidden amongst the laymen. Who said this? HAZRAT Mahbub Ilahi radiallahu anhu. He said that the spiritually elite are found sometimes amongst the ordinary people. Have you not noticed, without comparison, that sometimes amongst pebbles and stones you can find a gem? Have you not noticed? That sometimes amongst ordinary stones you will find a gem, you will find a diamond. Where do you find these things? You find it in the rocks. Somebody has to dig far down before they get it. But the one who digs needs to be expert, needs to know what he is looking for, so that he can separate this from that. So it's very difficult for the ordinary people to separate, to recognize. But HAZRAT Mahbub Ilahi radiallahu anh says that the elite, the spiritual elites, are also found hidden amongst the laymen. So to explain this, HAZRAT Mahbub Ilahi radiallahu anh gives an example. He gives a waqia. HAZRAT Mahbub Ilahi gives a beautiful narrative to explain this, that the elite, the spiritually elite, are sometimes found amongst the ordinary laymen. Okay? Like we're saying that a gem can be found among stones. He says that HAZRAT Sayyidina Bahauddin Zakaria radiallahu anh used to travel a lot. He traveled a lot. And once during his journey, he journeyed towards a nation, towards a people. And when he saw that these were ordinary people, so he just went and sat in their Jamaat. He didn't look for the pomp and splendor. Let me introduce myself, like we do. Let people know who I am. So everybody runs towards me with this dunyawi fanfare that we have today. No. He just went and he sat amongst the people quietly. HAZRAT Sayyidina Mahbub Ilahi radiallahu anh says that HAZRAT Sayyidina Bahauddin Zakaria radiallahu anh, he went and he sat amongst the ordinary people. Just went and sat down. He found a group of people while traveling. He sat down there. While he was sitting amongst them, HAZRAT Sayyidina Mahbub Ilahi radiallahu anh says that while sitting amongst them, HAZRAT Sayyidina Bahauddin Zakaria radiallahu ta'ala noticed that in that mahfil suddenly became very bright.
Before he entered that huge gathering of people, everything seemed fine. He goes and he sits inside there, and suddenly he finds the entire place is munawwar and roshan. If that happened to you and I, you'll think, it's because of me. This is our fitrat today. Allah protect us. Illa ma. Okay? So he went and he sat in this gathering of people, and suddenly he finds the entire mahfil is glowing, and there's light emanating from this mahfil. HAZRAT Sayyidina Bahauddin Zakaria radiallahu anh didn't look at himself and say, oh, these are just ordinary lay men. This only happened because I came amongst them. He didn't do that. He raised his sight, and with the sight of vilayat, he looked through the entire congregation. He said, let me find the one because of whom this mahfil is munawwar. He didn't look at himself. Let me look for the one because of whom this entire gathering is full of light. And HAZRAT Sayyidina Bahauddin Zakaria radiallahu anh, as he looked towards the jama'at of people, huge congregation of people, he finds there is one man who he can see. Everybody is there, nobody can see that light. HAZRAT Sayyidina Bahauddin Zakaria can see it. To see and recognize a gem, you need that person who is an expert in recognizing. Not everybody can find it. So he looks around and he finds this one person in the mahfil, and he can see कि उनकी जिस्म से नूर फूट रहा है. He can see that noor is bursting from his jism, from that ordinary, looking like an ordinary weak old man. From his body, noor is emanating. So quickly he goes towards that person without everybody paying attention. Very discreetly and swiftly, he goes towards this person from whose jism Anwar he is seeing noor emanating. He goes and sits next to him quietly, and he whispers in his ear. He says to him, what are you doing amongst these people? Inme baith kar tum kya kar rahe ho? What are you doing amongst these laymen? So the man looks at HAZRAT Sayyidina Bahauddin Zakaria, that great personality, that ordinary man who they thought was ordinary everybody else, who HAZRAT Bahauddin Zakaria recognized because of the noor that was emanating from him, which he saw with the sight of wilayat. When a person becomes a wali of Allah, what does Allah say? He becomes the eyes, I become the eye with which he sees. Subhanallah, Subhanallah. Not the physical eye. Here it is spiritual, in other words, to the noor of Allah he sees. Subhanallah. Beware of the firasat of a mu'min, فَإِنَّهُ يَنْظُرُ بِنُورِ اللَّهِ. For he sees with the noor of Almighty Allah. So he sees this personality and light is emanating from him. So he goes to him and he says, what are you doing with all these people? What are you doing sitting amongst these ordinary people? He smiles and he looks at HAZRAT Bahauddin Zakaria and he says, so that you may realize that the spiritually elite are found amongst the laymen also. Allahu Akbar. This is a very deep answer. Why? Because before that, HAZRAT Sayyidina Bahauddin Zakaria radiallahu anh would only allow certain spiritual elite in his bargah for special consultations. Why? Because the ordinary people would become an interference in it. So he said to him, Subhanallah, that I'm sitting amongst them so that you may recognize that amongst the ordinary people, the spiritual elite also sit there. Subhanallah. Now this is wilayat. This is ruhaniyat. HAZRAT Sayyidina Bahauddin not just went into the majlis. HAZRAT Bahauddin knew that there is one like that inside there. And that person didn't just come to the majlis. He knew Bahauddin is going to be coming here. That is why. Okay, this is the world of ruhaniyat. Discussing the same thing. Discussing this very... it's a long discussion, but discussing the same of the pious. You know, be nishano ka nishan mitta nahi. The more they hide themselves, the more Allah exalts them. And the more you try to look for izzat, the lower you're going to fall. Be nishano ka nishan mitta nahi, mitte naam ho hi jayega. Okay? HAZRAT Sayyidina Mahbub Ilahi radiyallahu anh says, in the same discussion, he says that there was once a budurg, one pious personality, subhanallah. When you say subhanallah, you're not praising, you're praising Allah. And every time you do it, you're planting yourself a tree in Jannah. So subhanallah. Okay. So HAZRAT Sayyidina Mahbub Ilahi Khaja Nizamuddin Awliya radiallahu anh, the same discussion of how the pious hide themselves amongst the people, the ordinary people, which is manifesting the words of HAZRAT Sayyidina Imam al-Baqir radiallahu anh. HAZRAT Sayyidina Mahbub Ilahi radiallahu anh Nizamuddin Awliya, as I said, whose urs is in this Mubarak month, past now, the 18th, says that once a budurg went amongst some laymen, ordinary people. And with his Nazr Vilayat, there he noticed a very pious man. There he noticed a very pious man. And what he noticed, which anybody else could not see, that this pious personality in 2 rak'ats used to complete the recitation of the entire Quran. Allahu Akbar. I want to ask myself and you, how much Quran have we recited this week? How many times this week have you recited the Quran and sent the thawab to your marhum parents or your deceased family members? HAZRAT Sayyidina Mahbub Ilahi says that this Budurg went into this Jamaat of people and he found a man there who was reading 2 rakats, but in the 2 rakats he knew and he recognized that he had finished the recitation of the entire Quran. When HAZRAT Sayyidina Mahbub Ilahi says, when this pious person saw this Budurg doing this in 2 rakats, he was amazed spiritually. It's something that is amazing. He was in a state of awe. And then he looked at the people where he was. They were ordinary people who couldn't even come close to his level. And he started to think in his heart that will he be able to remain steadfast like this? Because these people don't pray the same way like he does. They're not at that level. So if he lives here for too long, better he's in seclusion. Because if he lives here for too long, maybe he will not be able to carry on like this. Because it's not the same kind of mentality amongst the people. The same maqam-e rohaniyat amongst these people. So he thought this and he went away. He says, 10 years later, I passed by this same nation again. 10 years later, I passed by this same community again. And I found him still reading his 2 rakats, and in that the entire Quran Azim. That some are amongst the ordinary people, so that they may inspire the people. They may change their hearts. That is why HAZRAT Mahbub Ilahi radiallahu anh says, that once HAZRAT Sayyidina Khaja Hamiduddin Nagori radiallahu anh, who is the teacher of Quran of HAZRAT Sayyiduna Qutbuddin Bakhtiyar Qaadiri. HAZRAT Sayyidina Hamiduddin Nagori radiallahu ta'ala once went to the Holy Kaaba and was making tawaf. What was he doing? Making tawaf. Today people are making tawaf or taking selfies. Think about it. By you doing that, how is your heart and your mind and your spirit going to be in the court of your Rabb? Doing guna while you're supposed to be in ibadat. Now listen how you make tawaf. HAZRAT Sayyidina Khaja Mahbub Ilahi says, radiallahu anh, that HAZRAT Khaja Hamiduddin Nagori, radiallahu anh, the teacher of HAZRAT Qutbuddin Bakhtiyar Qaadiri, radiallahu anh, is making tawaf, but in front of him he saw a pious personality. He recognized him with his Nazr Bilal. So what he did, wherever that Budurg was placing his foot, while making tawaf, he was in front of HAZRAT Hamiduddin Nagori, radiallahu anh. Wherever that Budurg was putting his foot, HAZRAT Khaja Hamiduddin Nagori radiallahu anh was putting his foot. यानी वो अपना कदम रखते थे, जहां उठाते थे वो अपना कदम रखते थे. Wherever he used to pick up his foot, he used to place his foot there. And he continued making tawaf with him in this manner, following his footsteps in tawaf. What are we learning? That if you want your ibadat to be accepted, then follow the footsteps of the pious servants of Allah. Follow the footsteps. This is what Imam Ahmad Raza radiallahu anh said. This is what he said. He said that lahad mein ishq rukhe shah ka daag leke chale, andheri raat suni thi chirag leke chale, tere ghulamo ka naqsh qadam hai raah khuda. Tere ghulamo ka naqsh qadam hai raah khuda, wo kya bahak sake jo ye surag leke chale. Why did he say this? So he was going, wherever he put his foot, he put his foot. Now this only the Ahl Sunnat going to understand. No Wahhabi is going to understand. No Badmaz is going to understand this. Why? Unki aqal se ye baat dur hai. Okay? They can't understand this. Okay? They will not even recognize this. They do not even know this. Because to them this is bidah. This is shirk. Don't talk about all these things. This is what takes you close in the court of Almighty Allah. Okay? So Hazrat Hamidun Nagori is putting his foot. You learn 2 lessons here. You learn the apparent lesson and learn the hidden lesson also. The zahir and the batin also. He's putting his foot. Wherever he's going, he's putting his foot. Suddenly, in other words, he's synchronizing his action based on the one in front of him. based on that pious personality. In other words, a spiritual synchronization. He's following him. Suddenly the pious personality in front of him, the Buddha in front of him, he's drowned in the ibadat of Allah. He's making ibadat in that state, making his tawaf. And Hazrat Hamidun Nagori is putting his foot wherever he's picking up his foot. Suddenly he turns around and he looks at Hazrat Sayyidina Qadi Hamiduddin Nagori radiyallahu ta'ala anhu. And he says, why are you only following me in the zahir? Says to him, why are you only following me in the apparent sense? If you want to really follow me in the hidden sense also. Allahu Akbar. Great personality. He's saying, why are you only following me in the zahir? Yes, follow me in the zahir. But why don't you try and follow me in the batin also? Hazrat Qazi Hamiduddin Nagori radiyallahu looks at him and he says, tell me about the batin. Tell me about the hidden sense that you put. What do you do? Aap karte kya ho? What do you do? He said, Alhamdulillah, every day, I complete the entire Quran Azim 7 times. Allahu Akbar. Every day I complete the entire Quran Azim 7 times. When Hazrat Hamiduddin Nagori radiallahu anh heard this, he was in a state of awe. He said he started to think in his heart, he's probably talking about the essence of the Quranic meanings. Probably yehi khayal aa raha hai. That the essence and the tajalliyat of the text of the Quran is manifested upon his heart, and then he completes understanding the Quran in this manner. He is just saying this, and the Buddha turns back to him and he says, explicitly word for word and not in thought. Allahu Akbar. Explicitly, lafzan, na ke khayalan. Explicitly word for word and not in thought. When Hazrat Sayyidina Mahbub Ilahi completes narrating this, of how these pious servants are hidden and what is in them, the ruhaniyat. At that time there was a murid, a very close murid of Hazrat Mahbub Ilahi radiallahu anhu, Izzuddin Shah. He turned to Hazrat Khaja Mahbub Ilahi radiallahu anhu and said, Huzur, is this a karamat? Because how can a person do this? Is this a karamat? Hazrat Mahbub Ilahi said, yes, that which the ordinary intellect cannot grasp is indeed a karamat. He said, your ordinary mind is not going to grasp this. Likewise, the ordinary eye does not recognize the pious amongst the laymen. That is why you have to be very, very careful. And this is why, and why we have discussed this, why we're talking about this, so that you and I may understand that there are pious servants amongst us. There are those beloved servants amongst us through whom our du'as are accepted. Make dua. People say hide and make dua. Make dua in the court of Allah when you're alone. Yes, do that. Allah loves it. But make dua in congregation, for you do not know which one of their ameen will be kabul in the court of Almighty Allah. This is very important. Keep this in mind. Remember, I did this in tribute to Hazrat Mahbub Ilahi radiallahu anhu, today's discussion, so that you may understand how the pious sat in the majlis, how they sat in the gatherings. They didn't sit and talk about the dunya. They didn't sit and waste time. When they sat together with those who were with them, they spoke about Allah and His beloved Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and they explained to people ways of recognizing means to become close in the court of Almighty Allah. Allah give us tawfiq and khair. Allah keep us with iman. Let us leave this world with iman. I have taken 5 or 6 minutes more of your time today. Allah keep us with iman. Let us leave this world with iman. Those who are ill in our community, Allah grant them shifa. Come and say TAAJUSH. Those that have passed away in Ahl Sunnah, Allah exalt them in Jannat al-Na'im. Special dua for Huzur Sayyidi Muhaddis Kabir's good health, Huzur Qaadiri, and all the Mashayikh Ahl Sunnah for their good health. Those that are going through any difficulty, may Allah remove the difficulty. Special dua for the Sunni Muslims of Palestine. Dua for the situation in the Middle East that we are seeing now and unfolding so detrimentally. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala have mercy, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect the Muslims and destroy those who are trying to harm the Muslim Ummah. Allah keep us firm on Madhab Muhazzab, Mazhab Ahl Sunnat, MASLAK AALA. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.